how a woman and a man of faith should answer. When Abraham says, "Here I am," it meant that he was ready to be taught. Abraham was ready to obey. Abraham was ready to surrender. He was ready to be examined by God. Abraham was ready to do everything that God wanted. Allow me, church, to make mention this morning that the moment you have a personal relationship with God, whatsoever He shall tell you to do, you shall do it without a question. Because you are going to believe that it is the same God that has led me in the past. It is the same God that I have entrusted my future before, and I do not care where He's taking me, because in His hands He holds my future. This is what Abraham does. Abraham does not ask or rather question God. Abraham does not go to God and tell Him, "This is the very son that you gave back to me. This is the very son that you have put under my custody." He does not complain whatsoever. I love the faith that Abraham has. I love the faith that Abraham is showing in Genesis chapter 22. Abraham's faith was confirmed by God through the test. Now, the test that came to Abraham and the test that came at this particular time was not a test for Abraham to prove his faith. Are we together, church? This was not a test for Abraham to prove his faith, because God had already built a faith in Abraham. God had already talked to Abraham before. Abraham had already trusted in God. This was not a time for Abraham to prove his faith. Rather, it was a time for Abraham to reveal his faith towards God. This was not a time for Abraham to begin to have faith in God. This wasn't a time for Abraham to begin trusting in God, because Abraham had trusted in God already. Abraham had trusted in God to an extent where he did whatsoever God wanted from him. But at this particular time, it was not a time for Abraham to show his faith. It was not a time for Abraham to prove his faith. It was time for Abraham to reveal the faith that God had implanted in him. You know, when the Lord has led you in the past, when you have had an encounter with the Savior, your faith keeps on growing. Your faith keeps on growing. But a time when we have a test, and a time when the Lord comes to us and requires us to do something for Him, when the Lord comes to us and wants us to move a step further, that's when you and I prove and show and reveal the faith to God. We can only reveal something that we have deep down our hearts. We can only reveal something that has been there in our hearts. We can only try and reveal something that we have, trying to show it now to God, that we are here, and whatsoever you will want us to do, we are going to do it without any problem. Because of Abraham's faith, because of the faith that Abraham had, Isaac died before they even left their place. You didn't get me. Let me try to bring it home. Because of the faith that Abraham had, because of how Abraham had trusted in God, Abraham, in his mind, he had already killed Isaac. He had already offered Isaac to God. This is the faith that can be admired. The faith that Abraham has is the faith that can be admired. He confirms his faith to God. He says, "Lord, because you have spoken, I have no right whatsoever to say no to the word that comes to me." God tests us for two primary reasons. Number one, God tests us to give us an opportunity to prove himself to us. God comes to us and tests us to give an opportunity, or rather a platform, in order for him to prove himself to us. Number two, God tests us to give us an opportunity for us to prove ourselves to God. He comes and tells Abraham that I need someone that you love so much. Now, I'm not ashamed this morning to say that God will go for anything you trust in more than you trust in him until you put it on the altar. God will come for anything that you cherish and love so much more than him until you put it on the altar. God will come for your marriage if you love it so much more than God until you put it on the altar. God will come for your son until you put him on the altar. God will come for your money until you put it on the altar. Anything that you love so much more than God, shall God come for it until you put it on the altar. Anything that you cherish so much, anything that you love so much, anything that you enjoy so much, anything that hinders you to perform God's duty, anything that keeps you from doing God's work, anything that keeps you from loving the Savior more than you love this that you cherish, God will come for it. You have to put your health on the altar, your family on the altar, or else God will come for it.